So this is Albizia julibrissin, also known as a mimosa or a silk tree. As you can see, it has alternate arrangement on the stem. So this is one leaf right here, and it is bipinnately compound. So you can see it has one area where the leaflets, these would not be considered leaflets, but it would be like a leaflet, and then it has a bunch of these little individual leaves on each section. So that's the bi meaning two, and pinnately meaning sort of this coming off of a midrib. Then you have another little midrib and then little leaflets coming off of it. Typically the leaf is 20 inches long with 10 to 25 pinnae, which each have 40 to 60 leaflets. They typically leaf out in May to early June, and they can grow to a mature height of 20 to 35 feet with a similar spread. Typically they grow in a V shape with, usually they have multi-stems and a broad spread with a flat topped crown. And I'll kind of show you a video of the whole tree that I got this cutting from to kind of show some of those characteristics. It's hardy from zones 6 to 9. They usually do better in warmer, more tropical climates. It's native to Iran and all the way to central China and Taiwan. And this tree was introduced in 1745. So what I'm going to try to do is, I'm actually going to be cutting this tree down. It's in my yard. It is considered an invasive species. I wouldn't usually really mind it in the yard necessarily, but it's getting kind of close to the driveway and starting to get kind of big. So I'm going to cut it down, and then I'm going to make charcoal out of it to use in black powder. A lot of people like to make their own black powder, and tree species has a lot to do with the characteristics of the finished product. So I'm going to try to use this, since it is considered an invasive species, to see what the outcome of using mimosa charcoal for your black powder, kind of what the characteristics of that are, and maybe if we can get a good product, might be a good option for many people since it is an invasive species. So Benjamin Hoffman over at Hoffman Reproductions, he made a really good video about Swiss black powder. They use buckthorn in their black powder, so they don't use mimosa, but he made mention of some literature from Bill Knight, who is also known as the Mad Monk. And in that literature, he talks about they harvest their wood during late winter and early spring. So right now it's June in Georgia. So we're going to be harvesting this wood in the summer. So there will be probably a little bit of deviation in the actual product, the black powder that we make. But I'll probably end up just trying it, harvesting the wood at different times of year to kind of get a better baseline for the species in general. All right, so I was able to cut a pretty significant section off of, not the tree I was showing you, but it's pretty close proximity. Got some of the leaves and some branches over there that I'll probably be able to use. But I'm just gonna cut this up into small sections, split it into little quarters, and then just use it in my paint can. This is what I usually use for making charcoal. I just use a paint can with a little hole in the bottom. I've seen some where they put the hole on the top, and that actually might be a little bit better, because then you can kind of see the gases actually escaping, because you don't really want to put it upside down. I don't know, maybe you do, but sometimes I have to kind of tilt this a little bit to see the gases coming out, to see if they're still lighting on fire, because when the gases start coming out, they will ignite and you'll see the flame coming out. It almost sounds like a jet engine going off. And then when that kind of stops and slows down, you know that it's pretty much done. So that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to cut this up, chop it into some sections, stick it all in there, and then cook it in the fire. All right, so there we go. We got it all chopped up and quartered and ready to go. Probably Not all of this is going to fit in the paint can, but that's okay, because I'm going to let some of it kind of dry out to see if there's any difference in the finished product. I think the biggest difference with drying it out is going to be how long it takes to cook. But definitely going to try to cook some of this stuff green just to kind of get something going. When I was cutting this with the hatchet went basically through it like butter. It's not a very dense wood. It's very straight grained wood. I don't know if that's showing up on camera, but basically I would kind of get the hatchet started, and then I could almost just push the hatchet straight through. Now these are obviously not very big pieces. They're not very large size diameter, but not all wood is going to be like that. Some other woods that I've used Paulownia before, which is pretty popular, and I've heard people using willow, and those are also similar. They're not as dense wood, and that typically is an indicator of a pretty fast black powder. Things like oak and maybe hickory, I guess, usually tend to be slower and produce more sparks, which is good for fireworks. But you're talking about lift powder or making black powder for muskets and muzzle loaders, you want it to be as fast as possible. All right, so I've started loading up those pieces in there into the paint can. And usually how I do it is I try to fill the paint can up as much as possible. And I'm trying to get these pieces to basically stand on end in the paint can. And that can be kind of tricky if you're standing the paint can up regular. So usually what I'll do is I'll just tip it over on its side like this and just kind of load them in like this. That way you get them in there very securely and you don't really get a lot of pockets, and they basically, once you tip the can back up, they won't fall over, and you can fill all the voids in there very easily. All right, so I'm going to be leaving the bark on while I'm making this charcoal. However, just kind of a side note, if you did want to take the bark off, because it is the summertime, most trees, they'll have a heavy sap flow, and the bark basically will just come right off like that. So I guess one advantage of doing this during the summertime instead of, the winter or spring is that the bark will come off very easily on most species of trees. All right, so we got everything packed down in there. There are a couple little spaces in there, but I think those will be all right. There's some kind of wonky areas with some knots and stuff. It was kind of hard to get the pieces down inside there, but that was pretty much all of the mimosa for this round. So I'll probably have to cut some more to get it to dry out to try for later. But this is what we're gonna cook for right now. And I'm gonna definitely wait till it gets a little bit darker, a little bit cooler out before I start making the fire. All right, so we get this thing lit up and let it kind of burn down for a little bit, get started. And then once we get that started, we'll stick our paint can in there and start cooking some charcoal. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and set this on there just to get it kind of started. But you do gotta monitor it a little bit so that as the fire burns down, you don't really let it fall over. Let me see if I can get this off of there. That way it'll just start kind of heating that up, get it to start cooking, and then we'll move it as the fire burns down. Alrighty, so that's all buried. Like I said, really the only reason I'm doing this is because I thought I saw a hole kind of starting to form in the bottom on the edge, and you don't want any oxygen getting in there. Usually just setting it on top of the hole that you make is plenty to suffocate it out. But with those holes, they look like they were open up on the side. So just want to make sure no oxygen gets in there, because we want to make sure to preserve that charcoal and don't want any ash. We had it cooking for about an hour, so it was actually sitting on the fire for about an hour. Probably about 15 minutes it started really pushing the flames out, so maybe about 45 minutes it took it to really cook, but total time probably about an hour. All right, so as you can see, we didn't quite get it completely charred up. Some of these pieces are pretty charred. There's definitely some that are pretty much done. So we'll probably pull some of those pieces out that look like they're done. And then some of these other ones that didn't quite get finished, we'll put back in there, and probably just put it back in the fire for a little bit. See that one. So lesson learned, if it's still smoking and everything, it's not done. Some of it in there is pretty, that's completely done. Yeah, see, it just breaks apart like that. Totally black inside. So some of it's done, but definitely not 100%. All right, so once the charcoal is good and done, I put it in the ball mill overnight, and it is now a very fine powder. This is the Mimosa here. It's a very fine powder in there from being ball milled. I also made some charcoal out of some Paulownia, which I had some pieces of that have been sitting around, and that had actually been sitting around for a couple of years, so it was much older. And after doing some more research, couple things I wanted to make a mention of. Number one, you do want to take the bark off when you're making your charcoal. So in the video I showed sort of a way to take the bark off, and I said I wasn't going to be taking it off, but you should take it off. After doing some more research, I learned that. And then also the temperature that you burn or you cook the charcoal at has a lot to do with the finished product. So I kind of made another little setup to monitor the temperature. You want to try to keep it below 600 degrees. Right around 570 is, I think, kind of where you want it. I think in the video I say 540, but really it's about a 570. Anything really less than 600 is going to be good to make the charcoal the way that Swiss makes their charcoal. So I've been trying to do a little bit more research to follow some of the other information that's out there, to try to keep this pretty consistent and actually try to make the best product possible. So I am going to still use the Mimosa. I might recook another batch at a lower temperature. The Paulownia, I actually did cook at that lower temperature in the controlled environment. So we'll kind of get two tests at once. I've used Paulownia before in lift charges, and it works very well. So hopefully we can get it to be even better than what I've done before. So I repurposed a barbecue temperature monitor to try and regulate the temperature that I'm cooking the charcoal at. Right now I'm going to try to get it up to 540 degrees and cook it there and see kind of how that does. A little bit of research I did said that was a good temperature to cook it to get it to produce charcoal that will accept flame at a lower burn rate, or at a lower temperature rather. So just kind of got it stuck in that little hole there. Probably could go in a little bit further to get a better internal temperature. And really, you probably even install some sort of an actual thermometer onto your cooking chamber. But wasn't using this today, so gonna use it to make charcoal.